The Nikon Z8 is bigger and heavier than this 10-year-old DSLR. So what do we gain by losing the mirror? If you're starting out today, for work or play, is it mechanical operation or soulless computation? Art versus science. Hello, I'm Jack, scientist and street photographer, and when it comes to next-gen tech in my camera collection, the Z8 is first. But for pick-up ability, that impulse to grab and go to go out and shoot, it comes in second or on some days even third. The Z8 is the best camera I've ever used, but it's missing 4 flaws that make DSLRs more fun to shoot with. It's not just me, my friend Phil from Introvert Amateur, DSLRs are making a comeback. Today I'll talk about the best value Nikon DSLR you can get right now, not the DF, but this backwards move isn't logical. Mirrorless tech is exacting, every detail rendered, but it's what's out of frame that best defines the things that fit inside it. Flaw 4, what you see is not what you get.
Having an EVF is quite easy to learn on, because what you see is what you get. If you underexpose your image, you will able to see the image underexposed, so you see it's getting dark. That's something you are not able to get on the optical viewfinder, of course, and you will get the results afterwards. And that's also the reason why I shied away from optical viewfinders in general when I started photography, because I found that I was not able to dial in the ISO, shutter speed and aperture just based on the numbers to get a correct image. And that's where I appreciated the EVF when I started out.
The Z8's EVF might not have the highest resolution, but it's big, bright, lag-free and blackout-free. It never gets in the way. Optical viewfinders in comparison are not as bright, and you can't preview white balance, depth of field, or exposure anywhere near as accurately as an EVF. But for the style of abstract street photography I like to shoot, a super accurate image preview can be limiting. What I've found, especially on my old Fuji cameras, is everything looked the same. And it was hard to escape that feeling that you were just getting the same shots again and again and again, being limited by that image preview. And then when you're in post, being a little bit scared to change it from that film sim. I don't want to tug at the colors too much. I think that actually in the long term is quite limiting, which is why going back to the DSLRs with non-bound imagination of the optical viewfinder, it literally could be anything that you want it to be. I found it very freeing, not to mention there's no lag and you're not staring at a screen. When the electronic feed is superimposed with the manufacturer's color science, the sharpness enhanced through digital rendering, that baked-in look makes it harder to separate the camera from me. What you lose in precise metering, you gain through creative license via that OVF. The world's not predefined, still open to interpretation. What's out of frame shapes the things within. It's not every day a photographer gets a fellowship from Harvard, so in 1991, Felice Frankel had a choice. For this project, it would have been easier to stay within a frame of a visual arts training, but a last-minute audit of a chemistry lecture launched a decades-long quest to prove that art and science can mix. Minimalism is hard to pull off in street photography, especially during the day. The lighting's too even. There are too many commuters, but it's easier to hone in tight with a nifty 50. But it's hard to turn off decades of overly analytical training. If you're as interested in the minutiae as I am, you can find high-res versions of these sample images and behind-the-scenes details for every video I make on my website and by subscribing to my weekly email newsletter. Flaw 3 of DSLRs that makes them more fun to shoot with is simply a lack of innovation. Not just the bodies, also the lenses, and the fact that this is now a closed system can be a plus.
If you have a mount like the Z mount, you can create an optical perfect lens. It has its price, not only regarding the cash, but also the size of the lens itself. All companies are pushed to create new lenses which are performing better. They can't just rehouse DSLR lenses. If your job requires these kinds of lenses, the mirrorless systems provides that. If you're able to work with the flaws or character, you could say also, with the DSLR lenses, there's a reason why people like to adapt old lenses on their cameras, because all the mirrors are, for some people too perfect.
The era of DSLR lenses has come to an end. There's no Mark II, Mark III coming of any f-mount glass, so you can temper your expectations and just stop pixel peeping.
There's also a common trend, mist filters or anything like that, to soften the image and get a vintage blooming look, for example. Lenses nowadays are striving to objective perfection, and that's the reason if you need that kind of perfection, the mirror system provides that.
This is my latest purchase. This is a 35 f2 AFD. It's not the sharpest, but it's so small.
The last 2-3 years, every lens review of a G Master, an L glass or an S line, the first thing people talk about is the sharpness. People are looking for more character lenses. Old lenses from Nikon, I also have this Pancake 50mm 1.8. Beautiful small. And
so
also acquired this Nikon 80mm 2.8. It's a wide angle lens, and this on film gives a very nice unique look.
But is the last gen DSLR glass good enough? This entry-level budget Nifty 50 1.8G AFS is less than half the size, weight, and price of the 50 f1.8S for Z-mount. It's actually very well corrected, not much fringing, but of course it's less sharp and contrasty than the 50 f1.8S on the 40 plus megapixels of the Z8. Sure, these old AFS lenses lack those newer focus motors. There's back focusing and misalignment. If you go back further to AIS, AR glass, there are no modern lens coatings. I'm a big fan of the f1.4 Z line from Nikon. I just wish they were smaller because those lenses are flawed, but it's still the same size as the f1.8. I'd much rather them make f2 and then make them a lot smaller and have the same flaws. People would buy those way more than even the f1.4s, I think. A 35 f2 with an aperture ring, please?
Yeah.
Just remake this lens for Z-mount, please.
Vogtländer is able to market that kind of lenses, flawed optics, also sell that to people. And Thypok with the Eureka is also something similar like that.
To build your visual signature, that unique look, it will be what's missing from your frame that defines what's within it. Frankel's decision to become a science photographer didn't come with guarantees. A stark contrast to her architecture photography roots, even the widest of wide-angle lenses can't capture the edge of those chemical properties. Distilling the expanse of science, previously unimaginable concepts into single frames was an impossible task until she found the common thread that binds both science and art.
If your job depends on the results, mirrors technology, the latest technology just makes your job much easier with all the autofocus technology we have right now, combined with wide open lenses, which we have right now on mirrors, just something you don't have with the old tech, of course.
If you want to take photos of your kids, man, continuous autofocus is really nice to have. You can keep pace with your kids as they're running towards you once they learn how to walk. It's kind of like magic. On the Z8, even wide open, you can track a subject and keep them perfectly in focus with just one button. Not having to work anywhere near as hard to get the shot makes pro photographers' jobs much easier, but for street photographers with aspirations of fine art, there is a trade-off. But if I can be a spokesperson for focus and recompose, feel like I've got more control in a way. Feels like you're creating the image and it's more up to you as opposed to just the camera grabbing the eye and wherever you've composed it and framed it, it's going to have something in focus. I know that makes your job easier, but that means there's more shots that you didn't intentionally create. Manual focus or single point autofocus and recompose are imprecise and flawed old school techniques, but at least you're the one making the decision. It's easier than ever to surrender to the camera, automatically letting it track the closest face or eye. Sure, everything's in focus, but you're out of the picture.
People who are used to mirrorless technology, they don't know that kind of recomposing your image because that technique evolved through a bad autofocus, you could say. And nowadays you are just pointing your camera directly at the target and then you have your composition already nailed in.
It's not that great when you're just starting out to let the camera do all the work. I've learned on focus and recompose, and I still really like focusing and recomposing with this DF because I'm forced to. Its continuous autofocus is rubbish, but I'm not missing shots with it because I'm very intentionally framing.
It depends on where in which scenario you are shooting. So if your jobs depend on it, you can't just tell your client, I was trying to recompose, shoot and recompose, and trying a new technique.
Felice Frankel has shot everything from spinal cords to semiconductors. She instills intrigue through minimal, elegant compositions, and the main takeaway from her OpenCourseware class is how to deal with uncertainty. In both science and art, we can never fully grasp what we fail to imagine. What you choose to put in frame, however abstract, illusory, previously inconceivable, has to be defined by what's left out. Here is my Nikon DF.
The 5D Mark I, D700, Nikon D200.
Which do you use more often and why?
I got this D200 because of the CCD sensor. This one has a 10 megapixel CCD APC sensor.
Right.
Right now on social media, the topic of CCD sensors is high in demand because it's a cheaper film alternative, because of their special look and color science, especially because I got this one just for $60. So it's a nice bargain. Just in contrast, this M8 has also a CCD sensor, also cropped 10 megapixels, but this is running around, I think right now, around $2,000. Compared to the D700, this one is a full frame. Regarding the looks and the files, I prefer the D700 because out of these old DSLR cameras, the D700 has a lot of high dynamic range, so you are able to pull out the details from the shadows a lot.
Flaw one is size. I'll admit this is a flawed comparison. The Z8's a flagship hybrid body, the DF a niche photography-only use case, but the best mirrorless cameras are approaching the size of old DSLRs. For entry-level mirrorless bodies, there's no denying their size and weight advantage compared to the bulky Pentaprism and Mirrorbox.
The Fujifilm X-T1 is quite compact, thanks to this smaller sensor, but also thanks to there's no moving parts where the mirror needs to flip. Of course, you can also have something regarding full frame represented by this Q3. Other companies like Sony have their own A7C lineup, for example, the compact lineup. It's definitely much lighter compared to these cameras. The DSLRs are at minimum 600 to 700 grams without the lens. Look at ultra compact cameras, for example, these point and shoots back then. This is a Lumix LX100 with micro four thirds sensor. Also having that mirrorless technology. DSLRs, you are basically baked into that kind of form factor and size. Prism and mirror movement just require that space.
But there's worse thermal management in mirrorless, almost all of them overheat, and there's a less stable shooting platform which requires IBIS. That's why these days I prefer bigger camera bodies. Handheld video just looks that little bit more stable, but the extra real estate on the Z8 still doesn't fix mirrorless cameras' Achilles heel. There's no mirrorless model that's got absolutely amazing battery life. I mean, it's very competent, but if you shoot mirrorless professionally, I think if you go with one battery, that's insane. Even two batteries, insane. Usually people go into events with 5 or 6 batteries. When I started shooting with my Nikon DF, I was shocked at how good the battery life was. This battery is the one that shipped with the camera. 10-year-old battery.
Nice.
And it lasts me like 3 days. So which Nikon DSLR should you get for fun? I'd go with Phil's pick of the D700, a big beefy grip with good autofocus and dynamic range in decent lighting conditions. 12 megapixels is all you need when you're shooting for the web or for fun. Any camera newer than this one, say the D750, D780, D810, D850 or the DF, too much for a second-hand shooting experience. The DF in particular is a unicorn. It's the smallest full-frame DSLR ever made, and even though I love it, it's too expensive to recommend. Form factor isn't everything. I fell in love with DSLRs on my last Japan trip, and even though I brought a full mirrorless setup, I ended up shooting with old lenses way more than I thought. The gear I packed versus the gear I actually used while traveling is an ongoing evolution, and you'll find the details in the next video as well as on my website and weekly newsletter. Thanks again to Introvert Amateur for today's conversation. I'm Jack, this is Bokeh Therapy.